Thanks for joining us for How She Built That today. I'm Hazel Stark, your host, and today I am joined by Selina Chan, owner of Tealight Studios, which has an Etsy storefront that we'll focus on today. So let's jump right into it. Selina, can you introduce yourself and your role in your business?
So my name is Selina Chan. I'm the owner and maker at Tealight Studios. I'm the only employee of my business, so I'm a sole proprietor. And I make handmade dog accessories, so things like bow ties, bows, bandanas. I'm also an artist, so I'm recently just started to launch a line of stationery products that are all related to dogs. So it's all everything that I do is related to dog lovers.
Awesome. Thank you. That is really helpful background. So tell me about the history of your business. How did you come up with the idea for it? Presumably you're a dog person.
Yeah, exactly. So I started Tealight Studios in 2018. So about 5 years ago. And it started out as just like a side hobby. I was like, I'm like, I like to wear hair bows myself in my hair. And I was looking for more of them and I just couldn't find any in stores. So I started making some for myself. And I was like, I need a change in, scenery in terms of my work and art. And I was like, well, maybe I can combine like my love of dogs with what I do. So I was like, well, dogs can wear bows too. So I started doing that. And it worked really well for the first year. And then the second year, I started having my mom join me in making bandanas too. And since then, I've grown and had so many wholesale accounts, and I sell a ton of craft shows each year. And of course, on Etsy.
Awesome. So you actually have a successful business through Etsy. I think a lot of people have mixed experiences with Etsy. On one hand, it's that opportunity for anyone to get their work out there pretty easily. But on
Mhm.
the other hand, it can be really saturated in terms of how many people are out there selling stuff.
Yes.
And so today we're really curious and learning about your experience with Etsy. How did you set up an Etsy storefront and have it actually be successful for you?
It's a little bit of an intimidating process when you like first open up your Etsy store account and you're like, oh my God, this is a blank slate. Like you have to put products on there from scratch. You have to like add each individual listing, take pictures of all of your products. So it's a little bit of a process, but I think once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. Um, but I mean, at this point, I'm still pretty like just still growing my Etsy. It's hard for sure because there's just so many other makers on there. And over time, like your listings do go up on the search engine on Etsy. But it's a time consuming process for sure.
Okay, so but once it's set up, it's like a little bit easier to maintain. It's just kind of getting those
Yes.
initial things up there.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
just getting it initially set up, but then the maintaining part is pretty simple. Mostly just continuing to add products is pretty much all you need to do to maintain it.
You have an Etsy storefront, you also sell at crafts shows, and you also sell wholesale, and Etsy's just a blend of that. So what have you learned from having that blend and having Etsy as part of the fold?
I would say that I learned a lot from I guess selling on Etsy because of all the fees. Like I never realized how many fees there were on Etsy. They when they first explained it, they were like, "Oh, it's just a processing fee, a transaction fee." But like when it comes down to looking at your finances on Etsy, you can see that they take out a processing fee for the entire order, a transaction fee for each individual item that you sell,
Mm.
and then a transaction fee for the shipping label that you purchase through them, and then a listing fee for each item. So it's like there's just so many like individual costs for each item that you sell. Something that I wasn't aware of or didn't realize when I first started. Um, but it's something that you would have to incorporate into your price cost online.
Okay, so you're probably charging a higher price that the consumer is seeing on Etsy than you would at an in-person craft show.
I try to keep it the same. So this is where my fault is, and I probably should, do what I just told you. But uh, yeah, I feel bad for charging more than like what I do in in-person shows. I think over time I will increase that just a little bit. Um, but I do try to keep my pricing very similar to most places that I sell to, just so that I feel like I'm more like genuine. I'm not like gonna overcharge someone for something.
Yeah, that is really tricky when you have such diverse storefronts, so to speak, whether it's Etsy or in person or wholesale,
Yeah.
and wanting to be consistent to your consumer, but also be meeting your costs. That can be, I can see why that would be a challenge.
Yeah, so I take a hit, but it's not too bad. Like I've overall my pricing, I've worked in like a good wiggle room, so I'm not like losing out on a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess I would say that that's another reason why I haven't put so much time into my Etsy is because of all those fees.
Hmm.
And then if I were to put more time into my Etsy, I would raise my costs for sure.
So it sounds like an important part of maintaining an Etsy storefront, in your view, if you're really wanting it to be part of a main part of your revenue stream, would be having social media kind of tied in with it from a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
But what are some other ways that you maintain your Etsy, or could see that would be a good way to maintain your Etsy if you wanted to lean on it more?
Um, I would say, I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out actually myself. I do notice that if you put more listings on your Etsy, you have a better chance of getting out there, like on the search. So it's really like if I started out, like when I started out, I did only like maybe 20 products. And it was a very slow start to getting just natural traffic to my Etsy store from just basic search engine. Um, and like it just took probably about maybe a couple of years for me to get to a point where like people are finding me naturally, instead of finding me through social media or a link on my business card, things like that. So I would definitely say that having a good looking Etsy storefront, having a lot of products, having a good story on your Etsy, good graphics, those are all like super important to maintaining your Etsy.
Okay, that's really helpful. So, what is the transaction process like on Etsy? I know if you're at a craft show, it's like, here's my product, here's how much it costs, and then the person pays for it right there.
Mhm.
How does that look on Etsy? Are there different phases at that point, or is it pretty simple?
It's pretty smooth and straightforward. That's the part that I really like about Etsy. It might be similar to Shopify, where someone places an order, I get a notification in my email, and then that's when I go to my Etsy dashboard and I see the order, see what they purchased, and everything, and I go and package my order. And then once I finish that, I go back to my Etsy dashboard and I look at that order, and it says like get shipping label. And I usually just get my shipping label directly through Etsy
Mm.
because they do offer a good discount on shipping, which is pretty great, as opposed to going to the post office and paying for it, upfront. That's a little hard, but so once I get the shipping label on Etsy, it automatically marks your order as completed or done. So that's pretty much it. And then you're good to go. And then Etsy already has the tracking number and it sends a notification to the customer, and you don't really need to do anything else after that.
That's awesome. Well, that sounds pretty simple.
Mhm.
So, are there challenges with having an Etsy storefront? You mentioned, of course, the aspect of really needing to maintain it and connect it with social media if you really want it to work for you, for people to naturally find you, and how long it took for folks to find you naturally. That sounds like a challenge, but what are some other challenges that come up?
Um, Honestly, that's my biggest challenge. I can't really think of too many other like problems with having it. Um, and I know that a lot of people always wonder, like, do I have my own website? Do I sell off of my own website? Um, so it's not really a challenge, but to me as a business owner, I feel like I should have my own website and be selling on my website only. So it's just like having an Etsy. I feel like I'm a little bit lower tier. I don't know. That's just how I think. But
So are you planning on keeping your Etsy storefront, or do you want to transition to different ways of having transactions happen for your business?
yeah, I think overall, I would like to keep my Etsy, but it wouldn't be at the forefront of my business. I would keep it only because other people can find me from around the world. And I've got it to a point where people can do that and see my listings pretty far up in their searches. So that's the only reason why I would want to keep it. Um, so I think going forward, I would like to be selling off of my own website. So everything that when people go to my website link is just directly to, only about me, and there's no other listings around that. So, but I would still like to keep my Etsy overall.
Okay, interesting. So looking back at the about 5-year history of your business, what would you do differently next time around, if anything, not necessarily related to Etsy, just anything related to how you've built your business and what you might change now looking back?
I would say looking back, I really should have honed in on making my website. It's something that was so intimidating. I was like, I do everything myself. So if I were to put more time, more resources into putting my website together, would have been pretty helpful, I think. But what I think that I did do right was starting off on Etsy, because it was just a lower overhead cost, I feel like, overall. And it was easier to get more traffic, at least, compared to me spreading the word myself about my website, which is harder.
Yeah, so there's like you win some, you lose some. Like
Exactly. I
each
think
approach
Etsy's a good,
can work. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think Etsy is a good starting point for like new businesses. It shows you how to run an online store pretty simply, as opposed to like going to Shopify and just starting from scratch. You don't know anything about selling e-commerce.
Interesting. So what advice would you have for other entrepreneurs considering using Etsy? Maybe they haven't set up a website at all and they're looking to start trying to sell some stuff like you would find on Etsy. What advice would you have for them? Like, should they go for Etsy? Should they not? Should they do a mix of things? What do you think?
I think if they were to consider doing Etsy, if they're not familiar with e-commerce at all, Etsy is a good starting point. Definitely consider putting in the fees, the fee costs into your item price. That's something you should do when you very first start putting your items on Etsy. I would also say that if they were considering having an Etsy shop, have a good amount of product to put in all at once. If you put in one item at a time, it's even slower of a start to get noticed through searches, and it just looks better overall if you have a good selection of product.
Okay, that's helpful. Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it would be very appealing to be like, well, now I have this bandana, now I have this bow, and over time just adding very slowly. But yeah, when you go to an Etsy storefront, you're like, ooh, they have this whole blend of things that are available. That looks great. Might make people stick around a little bit longer and maybe even take you more seriously when,
Exactly. I was going
yeah.
to say,
Mhm.
and usually I think of it in, like, for my eyes, when I go on Etsy and I'm looking at, things to buy for myself, the things I look for is, do they have good reviews? That's a huge one. It took me a while to get, over 100 reviews, and that's all just naturally. I don't ask people for reviews. I don't ask anyone to buy anything on my Etsy. Everything I do is pretty much all natural. Of course, people can, you know, try to have people, like their friends or whatever, buy on their Etsy, so that grows. It looks better. I don't do that, but I would say that, having a good amount of reviews is really important on Etsy. There's a star seller on Etsy, so this is something where, like, if you look for an item on Etsy and you go to a shop, they have a special mark on there that says star seller. And that means that this person is really quick to respond to questions and messages. They're quick in shipping, overall have a good track record. And this is something that Etsy added, and it's been kind of controversial because if you accidentally miss like one order in shipping, and you're slow one day or something like that, you lose that for the month. And it's
Oh,
like,
that's stressful.
yeah, like
Yeah.
for me, it's like I try to keep that so it looks better when people like see me on Etsy and they're like, "Ooh, I want to buy from the star seller." But like it's not necessary, you know.
Hmm.
Like other stores can equally be as good without the star seller.
Good to know. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's definitely some like hidden information there that I don't think
yeah,
the average customer might be aware of. So that's helpful.
yeah. They started
Interesting.
doing that over, I think, over the pandemic, to
Yeah.
help businesses. I think in a way it's definitely a little bit. It could help them, but it could also hurt them.
Do you think that the Etsy market got especially flooded during the pandemic with more people at home, like
Yes,
crafting and just like, maybe I could sell this. I lost my job. I can make a
yes.
pot holder out of rubber bands. And so like put it out there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No, that has definitely happened. Like I look on other Etsy shops and I see like when they very first started, because if you scroll all the way down on each person's Etsy shop, you can see like when they started their shop.
Mm,
And usually I notice that's like 2020 or 2021, you know, things like that. And for
mm.
me, it says 2015. That doesn't necessarily mean that I opened my shop in 2015. It just
Yeah.
means that like I opened it, but I didn't have anything on there.
Interesting.
Um, so I always look at that and I'm like, oh, it doesn't really look too good. And I probably should have just started from scratch when I actually started having a good amount of stuff to sell. So
Hmm.
that was another thing that I probably could have done better.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I feel like very few people, especially women, are ever like perfectly happy with how they did things. Like there's always things that we can do better. And so
Yeah.
it's awesome of you to come in this venue to share what you've learned with other entrepreneurs here in Maine who maybe they can avoid some of the same mistakes that you did. But even with those few mistakes you mentioned, we might not even call them mistakes because you're in a really great place and you learn from them and are kind of rolling forward really successfully. So that's really exciting. You're doing
Yeah.
really well. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would add related to your business journey, how you built it, and the whole experience?
Yeah. So I guess I would say that like, I mean, for me, it was a slower process than a lot of people that I know, in terms of growing my business. But for many years, I was fully employed, and this was just a side hobby. So um, I've recently taken a huge leap and doing this full time, as of last year, partially, but this year officially. I'm doing this full time, and it's definitely opened my eyes up a lot. Uh, trying to get income and revenue for myself. Um, it's been a struggle, but I'm trucking along.
Yeah, yeah, that's hard. That's so scary. I think the reverse is also really scary where people start out full time on their business and then
Yeah.
having to make a choice like I've got to take another job. It's never an easy decision and you just don't
Mhm.
know how it's going to work out. But yeah, is it feeling worth it at this
I
point?
do I do feel like it's worth it for sure, because if I didn't do it, I wouldn't have been able to grow to even more stores or get my name out there even more. Like I needed that time.
Hmm.
Um, so like overall, even though I am most of the time working a lot, or stressed out, it's overall worth it. For this is something I really am passionate about and growing. Like I hope to eventually have my own storefront. So
Hmm.
that's the ultimate goal, and it's something that I need to take a leap and do this on my own.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Selena, for jumping into this How She Built That edition. Really helpful to hear about your journey and where you're going and what your hopes and dreams are moving forward. It's a really exciting business, and people can check it out by really just Googling Tealight Studio, right? Should come right
Mhm.
up. Awesome. And you're on Etsy as well. So thank you, Selena, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.